Chapter 9. The Puzzling Circle. Chuckling, Ned took his eyes off the street just long enough to glance at Nancy, seated beside him in his car. "You certainly can jump from one clue to another pretty fast. So you're not going to tell me what your latest hunch is?" Nancy laughed. "No, I'm not. This one you'll have to figure out yourself," she teased. "Okay. I'll find a place to park and we'll go into the ballet." The performance was about to begin as the couple took their seats. The program was drawn from a broad range of traditional to contemporary dances. The first selection was set in a woodland scene. 4 dancers in filmy, pale gray costumes flitted across stage. Nancy glanced at Ned as he shifted uncomfortably. She could see that he was not particularly interested. "He'll like the next number better," she thought. The lithe dancers had barely left the stage when several male dancers, dressed in green frogman costumes, entered. While Nancy was intrigued by the idea of dancing in flipper-like footgear, Ned wanted to laugh at first. Not wishing to embarrass his companion, he merely grinned. After a while, he admitted to himself that the costumes, particularly the undersea headgear, were clever. Even the dance, which combined familiar movements with swim-like steps, began to fascinate him. When the number ended, Ned turned to Nancy. "I think I have a clue to your clue. You think one of these leaping frogmen might be the specter who frightened Mrs. Thurston." Nancy merely smiled. Ned's surmise was correct, but none of the dancers had shown the talent to leap the distance that Mrs. Thurston had indicated. During the intermission, she told Ned she would like to talk to the stage manager or director of the troupe. The couple went to the lobby and spoke to the woman in the box office. Ned made the request of her and gave their names. "I'll see," she said, and disappeared into a rear office. The woman soon returned and smilingly announced, "Mr. Van Camp will see you after the show. He'll be backstage with the dancers." While waiting for the second part of the ballet to start, Nancy began to formulate questions to ask the man. Soon the house lights dimmed and the curtains rolled back. The third number was a solo, and so interesting to Nancy that she sat on the edge of her seat and watched intently. The dancer was a star performer named Boris Borowski. His muscular control and grace, combined with a handsome appearance, were captivating. He interspersed the dance with spectacular leaps. During one dramatic movement, Boris swooped through the air from one end of the stage to the other with such ease he really seemed to be flying. Nancy overheard a comment that perhaps Boris was Peter Pan in disguise. Ned was fascinated too. When the number was over, he whispered to Nancy, "Is he your villain?" She shrugged. "We'll find out after the show." The applause was thunderous and continued until Borowski began to dance an encore. Other numbers followed, but none could equal his, which had been the high point of the evening. When the curtains were drawn finally, Nancy and Ned walked toward the stage and opened a side door. They ascended a few steps and watched the scene on stage. A man in a business suit, apparently the director, was talking to the dancers, who were still in costume. Nancy and Ned politely waited until he had dismissed the ensemble. Then, as the man turned to leave, they stepped onto the stage. "Mr. Van Camp?" Ned asked. The man nodded. "You are the couple who asked to see me?" "Yes," Nancy replied. "First, I want to tell you how much I enjoyed the entire ballet. Your dancers and the selections were really wonderful." Ned smiled. "I admit Nancy dragged me here, but I found myself liking the performance very much, particularly the high jumper." The director smiled at Ned's athletic reference to the troupe's star dancer and Nancy was grateful for an opening to ask her first question. "Mr. Van Camp, do you know of any other male dancer in this area who can compare with Boris Borowski?" "Yes, I do," the director replied. "He used to be with this troupe, and I hated to lose him. He was one of the best talents I ever worked with. Unfortunately, I had to let him go." Mr. Van Camp looked questioningly at the young people. "Did you have a particular reason for wanting to know?" Nancy wondered just how much she should reveal and replied, "Yes, my father is an attorney and something strange happened on the case he's handling. A clue to someone involved might be a male dancer who can leap unusually high." Mr. Van Camp now divulged the fact that he had discharged the other dancer for his disreputable connections and unprofessional attitude. "I don't know what he's doing now, but I imagine he's been dodging the law since he left here. His real name is Mervyn Gantry, but the stage name he uses is Merv Marvel." Ned asked, "Could this Merv Marvel guy be mixed up in any kind of a land deal?" Mr. Van Camp frowned. "I imagine he could be mixed up in almost anything. Merv had a strange way of mesmerizing people. He could get them to do just about anything." Nancy was struck by the word mesmerized. How did he mesmerize people? The director said he had even heard a rumor that Marvel had tried fleecing superstitious people by scaring them with signs of warning and strange omens of bad luck. "What kind of signs?" Nancy asked quickly. "Various kinds, I was told," the director replied. "By the way, if you ever come across him, don't let him try to sell you anything." "Thanks for the tip," Ned replied with a grin. "Could you tell me," Nancy persisted, "what any of the signs were?" Mr. Van Camp said that Merv was very angry at being discharged. "He left one of his symbols on my desk." The director pulled a notepad from his pocket and with a pencil drew a circle with a cross inside. Nancy wanted to shout for joy, but restrained herself, as did Ned, who said nothing. She had picked up a real clue. Mr. Van Camp went on, "I've been told that this symbol means bad luck of some sort." Nancy did not comment, but wondered, is this a private mark the ex-dancer uses, or is he a member of some witchcraft group? Out of the corners of their eyes, the couple became aware of some dancers still waiting in the wings to talk to Mr. Van Camp. Nancy and Ned started to thank him and excuse themselves when he surprised them by asking, "Have you people ever danced ballet?" Ned laughed. "Only around a football field." Nancy told him that she had taken ballet lessons and loved them. "Sometime I'd like to learn to leap," she said. "We only studied it a little in acrobatic class." Mr. Van Camp's eyes twinkled. He called out, "Boris, come over here." The agile dancer walked forward and was introduced to Nancy and Ned. Mr. Van Camp repeated Nancy's remark to Boris, who smiled. "I'd be happy to help her, but first let me see you dance a little, Nancy." "Music!" Mr. Van Camp called out to the musicians, who were in conference with their conductor. Nancy was flushed with excitement. She took off her shoes. As soon as the music started, she found it easy to execute simple movements, then, with increasing confidence, more complicated ones. Some of the professional dancers came on stage and applauded. "You are excellent," Boris complimented Nancy. "Take my hand." As they started to dance together, Ned was amazed by his friend's obvious talent. He began to clap too. Boris himself seemed pleased with his pupil. As the tempo of the music increased, the star's performance encouraged Nancy to make more strenuous leaps. Though Nancy could feel a twinge of muscle cramp, she was determined to dance her best. When the music ended, Boris surprised and embarrassed Nancy by giving her a hug and a kiss and saying, "You're wonderful!" Nancy was pleased, but decided she would always prefer Ned as her steady dancing partner. She thanked Boris Borowski and wished him continued luck in his career. Mr. Van Camp came to pat her on the shoulder. "Any time you're looking for extra work, let me know," he said, smiling. "It has been a real pleasure meeting you and Ned. I certainly hope our paths cross again." "I hope so too," Nancy replied. Lowering her voice, she added, "And thank you for the information about Merv Marvel. I'll pass it along to my father." Blushing happily, she left the theater with Ned. He was very quiet, and she wondered if he was embarrassed by her ballet exhibition, or was he sulking a bit out of jealousy? She herself said little, but at the Drew home she began to relate the full story of the day's happenings to her father and Hannah Gruen. She had hardly begun to speak when Ned arose. "If you don't mind," he said, "I think I'll go to bed. I'm really beat." He said good night and went upstairs. "Ned doesn't seem like himself," Mr. Drew remarked. "Nancy, did something happen between you two today?" Nancy explained about Ned's and Mr. Thurston's unpleasant experience. "Then no doubt Ned is feeling the aftermath of it all. Sleep is the best thing for him." Her father's comment caused Nancy to wonder if she had been inconsiderate of Ned in suggesting they attend the ballet. She chided herself for it, then went on with her detailed report. Nearly an hour passed before they went upstairs. The lawyer praised his daughter for having uncovered the clue to the leaping specter. "I'll have someone start working on that angle at once," he said. Nancy found that she too was very tired and dropped off to sleep at once. It was sometime in the early morning that she was awakened by voices out in the hall. Peering from her door, she observed Hannah and her father talking together worriedly, and she asked what was troubling them. "Ned is very ill," her father said. End of chapter 9.